Hey everyone, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to implement Vue server-side rendering in .NET Core. And just as a side note, before we start this video, this topic can be very confusing. And if you are still confused by the end of the video, rewatch it and make sure you take your time to step over through the code to really try and understand it. Otherwise, this confusion won't go away until you dig into it and really try to understand the code. Google which parts do what and make sure you have a clear image of what is going on. So nevertheless, let's go into our Vue app where we have left off in the boot server. So here's where I basically said execute our Vue app here. So essentially what I mean by this comment is that we want to take our server bundle, what I've explained in the previous video, and we want to execute it here, and we want to produce a server rendered application. So let's go ahead and create this bundle. In our Vue app, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file, and I'm going to call it server.js. Okay, and in here, what I want to do is I want to extract, or rather surface my app, my router, and my store to be able to manipulate it. So let's go ahead and basically return them from a function. So what we're going to do is we're going to call a function and return fresh variables every time, because if we have two requests calling this file and these kind of act as singletons right now, we can basically get modified instances instead of getting fresh ones every time. So the first thing we want to take care of is remove this app.mount. Let's go ahead and export function create app. And this function, I will drop the curly bracket at the end here. What I want to do is first let's change all of these variables to const. So I changed these to constants, and now I'm basically just going to return an object which has these properties. Okay, and now when I go into the server bundle, I can go ahead and import them from my main.js. So let's go ahead and get our function here. And what I want to do is export a function. So whatever happens in this bundle is going to be fed to the Vue server-side renderer, which is a package, and it expects certain things to be returned to it. I'm not just pulling out these things randomly. I am building this exported function to appease the Vue server-side rendering package. Okay, so we're gonna export a function. It's gonna be a fresh function. And sorry, I forgot the default here. So export default function, and in here we're gonna go ahead and return a new promise. So this promise is something that the package will need to consume. So resolve and reject. Okay, so before we go into this promise, let's go ahead and extract our our properties from the function. So let's go ahead, say const, and let's destructure our app, our router, and our store from create app. Now, one thing that the package will allow us to pass to this function is the context. So and this context will essentially be an object that we choose what it is, and we can pass stuff to regarding the URL that we are at. So that's pretty much the parameters that we get in this params from our .NET Core. So I'm gonna pass some stuff into here, which I will need to basically initialize the router. So if we are at some route, we want to let the router know to be able to load proper components. So let's go ahead and initialize the router. I'm gonna go ahead and say router.push, and we are gonna need to navigate to a route, right? So this is what this push does. So I will need a URL, and I'm gonna go ahead and extract this URL from the context that we're passing. Okay, just like that. Now the router needs to some time to get ready. So once it's ready, this is kind of if you ever use the jQuery, it takes time to load. So, but basically when we push it, it takes time for the router to do its thing. So once it's ready, let's carry on. And once it's ready, we basically want to do two things here. We want to initialize state. So we're going to be ready to render some components, and those components are going to be ready to get stuff from the store. So what I mean by initialize state is also initialize store, right? So this is where we put stuff into our store. Other than that, I'm not going to do that yet, so I want to take this step by step. For now, I will just go ahead and resolve my app. So the Vue server-side rendering package will receive this promise, and this promise will return my app. And because this router is already assigned to this app in my main.js here, this is kind of why it works, and the Vue server-side renderer will know what to do with this app in order to render it. But let's see how it works. For this, we will actually need the Vue server-side rendering package, which I was talking about for a while now. So let's go ahead and install it into our dev dependencies. Vue server renderer. Okay, so once that has installed, let's go ahead check package.json, and hasn't installed for some reason. I'm not sure why. So let's go ahead and run it again. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to run npm install again with this. Hopefully we'll put in my, let me restart this. Oh, okay. So this is completely my mistake. I am in the wrong directory. Let me delete the node modules here and the package.log.json here. And let me cd into my Vue blog. Again, I will run npm install Vue render. Okay, so once that is here, again, I'm not seeing modify. Okay, there it is. Took some time to pop up, but here's our Vue server-side render, and this is why it's a good idea to always check your package.json before you proceed, because like this mistake, you might have just installed it in the wrong folder. So after installing this, let's go ahead and into our boot server. This is where we want to surface our server-side render. So let's go ahead and get our server-side renderer. So let's call it Vue renderer, and we are going to require this package, Vue server renderer. And let's see what this Vue server renderer has. It has two functions: create render and create bundle renderer. Now the difference between these two functions, if you read the Vue server-side renderer API, so this package's API, you will find out that this is essentially, if you're not using .vue files and you're not using Webpack and you're just using the pure Vue.js file, you can use create renderer and just pass your app to it. But we're using a server bundle, and we're going to be creating a server bundle, so we'll need to create a bundle renderer, right? So we're going to be rendering a bundle, and we're not just going to be rendering an application. So this is why we're using create bundle renderer. And this bundle renderer will, if we navigate to it, we will need a bundle. And the second parameter is some options. We will jump to the options, but a little bit later. For now, we need to provide the bundle, and the bundle is going to be this server.js, but webpacked. Okay, so let's go ahead and pack it with our webpack. In here, what I want to do is change the target to Node. So we're gonna run this using the Node.js server, and the next thing I want to do is provide a library target, and this is something to just provide support for ES6. If you Google what common JS2 is, it's a library that just is basically same as Babel. It's just polyfills for newer JavaScript syntax. Okay, so once we are basically targeting Node with these two options, what I want to do is create the server-specific bundle. So for our entries here, I want to go ahead and read the server.js file. So I'm going to change the name here. I'm going to just change the name to bundle. Okay, and what this will allow me to do is to name my file according to this entry name. So it's going to be bundle, and I can say dash server. So there is, remember that there is going to be two different bundles, a client bundle and a server bundle, and we'll get to the client bundle in a minute. So let's go ahead and check everything else. Should be okay. So once we start our application, Webpack is going to execute, and that is going to create a new file in our dist folder, and this file is going to be called bundle server.js. Okay, so let's go ahead here and let's same as we use the path constant here. I want to go ahead and resolve the path to this bundle server that doesn't yet exist. So let's go ahead and create a const file path. And before I do that, let me change my variables to const just to be consistent here. Okay, so what I want to do here is take the path and join their name and basically my local namespace. So this is going to put me in the Vue app folder. So what I want to do is I want to exit it. I want to go into www root and I want to go into dist, and then I want to grab this bundle dash server.js. It doesn't exist yet, but it will once our application starts. So this file path is essentially the path to our bundle server, and this is what the create bundle renderer wants. So let's go ahead and give it what it wants. So this is then going to return a object, which is a bundle renderer. So let's go ahead and put it into a variable. Const bundle renderer. Okay, so our bundle renderer here is now ready to receive an application to render, and the application that we want to give it is this server.js, which we are doing right here. So all we need to do now is execute our Vue app. So let's go ahead and take the bundle renderer and do render to string. Okay, so as I said before, we can pass a context to our server.js, which we can do here. So let's go ahead and create a const context, and we are going to create a new object, and for now we're only using the URL, so let's go ahead and extract URL from the params. I'm going to basically delete this console log params. If you want to keep it there, you can. I'm also going to delete this log and this variable that we're calculating, and I'm going to pass the context to this render to string function. And what this function will do is it then has a callback function as a second parameter, and then here the first parameter is error, so let's go ahead and say error, and then the second parameter is the HTML that it's going to return. So let me turn this into a function, and like this. Okay, so straight off the bat we can just move this here and get rid of this HTML that we're passing to here and just leave it like this. Remember that supplying HTML to an object like this is pretty much the same as saying this. So I will leave it like so. And what we can do is we can go ahead and check if we have an error. Let's call the reject function and pass the error there. And let's just put the curly brackets here just for clarity. Alright, so this all looks okay to me. Let's go ahead and run this and see what we get. So .NET run. Okay, so we're not getting any errors yet, so that is a very, very good sign. Let me exit full screen, and there you can see I'm navigating to my mega blog. It looks a little bit different, but let me just put this to half screen. If we refresh, we don't have our regular bundle.js that we are rendering in our index.html, if you remember. But what we do have is the text in the title, so megablog. If we look into our app.view, this is where this megablog is, and the rest is the router view. And the reason it's not rendering the blogs is because the fetch to the server isn't happening. And we will get to this now, actually. So let's go ahead and close this. So just as a mental note, know that we are already rendering our Vue app on the side. Now what we have to do is initialize the store correctly. Okay, so the reason, if we go into main.view, right here you can see that we are getting our blogs from the store. So at this point, our server side is failing to fetch these blogs. So let's go ahead and take care of that. I'm going to close this main.view. Also, I noticed in my app.view, I have these empty data and created, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that and actually delete these methods. Our app.view doesn't need anything. So let's close that. Let me go full screen again here. And let me close the console. As you can see, we have this error here. And what this basically means is this error regarding fetching, what's it called? Fetching posts in our main.js, if I can find the file. So it's these calls that are failing, okay? So, and the reason they're failing, if we go to server.js, where we want to initialize the file here, when we create the store, or rather when when it navigates to that route, it tries to execute the store, but it's not waiting for anything, so it just goes ahead and resolves this, and then there is no longer an app to return it to. So it's like it's an asynchronous operation, and we're not waiting for it to complete, okay? So let's go ahead and take care of that first. Let's make it an asynchronous operation that we can wait for. So what we'll have to do is go into our main.js. Let me hide the console here. Let me actually stop this. I will close this console. And what we will need to do to await on this is we will need to return it. So when we return it, what we actually return is a promise. So by returning a promise, we can know when it has completed. And I'm just going to do the same thing here. The next thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead into our server.js and just let's take our store here. And all I'm going to do is just dispatch and provide the name, so load blogs. This is not an ideal solution for now, but this is just a quick get it to work solution. So because we might be on different routes, and but if we're hitting a blog, we don't want to load all the blogs. We want to load this method, and how to do this we will work out in a minute. Just let's go ahead and solve rendering the blogs, because we're going to be landing on the root path to start with. So we're dispatching this action, and this action is going to return a promise. Now, because it returns a promise, we can now call then and know when it has been completed, but we're not returning anything actually. So let's go ahead and keep it as a function, and now we can resolve it once it has been actually completed. So once our store has finished loading the data, we want to resolve our app. So let's go ahead and see how this works. Let's do, oh, a new terminal. So let's do .NET run again. Let me open the console. Okay, let's refresh. Okay, so it seems we are getting another error and a timeout. So one thing that we can do is let's stop this. Let's go into our main.js, and where we let's see where we get the blog. Let's go ahead and catch the error. I probably already know what it is, but I just want to make sure that you guys understand what it is as well. And let's actually, because we're returning, or rather, should we do it like that? Never mind, let's cache it here. So let's run this again. Okay, so let's give this a refresh. Okay, so it's not loading it again, and the reason for this is, oh, did it load it? Let's try again. My mess up. I'll give this another refresh. Okay, so it has loaded it, but there are still no blogs that we're trying to render, and this is because you can see we're getting some mad response here. So if we go, you can see that the current URL that it's trying to query is http:/blog. So there's our problem. We don't know, or rather we don't have a root URL that we're calling it from, or rather an origin. Okay, so let's go into our server.js, and we are going to ask our context for one additional piece of data, and that is going to be the origin. And now what we can do is pass this origin to load blogs. So origin, just like this. Now we go into main.js, accept our origin, and what we can say, because we only need the origin on the server side, if origin equals null or origin equals undefined, what we're going to do is we're going to set origin to be slash, And now we can go ahead and replace the origin here with, or rather the dash here with origin. So it's going to be /blog, or I think a more reliable thing will be to keep the blog and set this to an empty string. Okay, so let's go ahead and stop this. Let's rerun this. Okay, so let me exit full screen. Let me refresh this. And I've actually forgotten to pass the origin. Wow. Okay, so in our boot server here, I don't think this will require a refresh, but let's go ahead and say origin equals params, and there's an origin parameter on our params here. So that should do it. And now let me refresh it, and now you can see that we are getting the blogs. If we click on them, we get the reload here. So basically our spot is not being sent to the server side, and the loading here isn't doing anything. We don't have our bundle.js, we don't have our client application. So let's go ahead and take care of that now, since we're passing in some state. Let's go back into full screen here. I will stop my application and I will clear it. So first things first, what I want to do is I want to create a bundle for the client. So same thing that I did with server.js, but now I want to do it for the client. So let's go ahead and create a client.js like this, and we will grab this import create app function, same as we did before. And what we want to do is extract these. So let's grab these here. And now the simplest thing we can do is basically grab the router. We can say if it's ready, let's just say we're not pushing anything to the router. We're just checking. If the router is ready, go ahead and mount the app. So let's quickly check what we have in our response here. If we have an app ID, so we have a class ID. So instead of doing #app, I will just do .app. And let me go back. All right, and this will actually do for our client for now. And I'll put a comment. So obviously we will need to do something with the store to make our client catch up with our server side. So let's go ahead and basically say catch up with server here. Okay, so before we mount our app, we want to catch up with the server, and how we're gonna do that, we will cover it in a bit. So now we want to be able to build this client. So because we're going to be creating a build for the server, and this is currently a build for the server, there are going to have to be two different Webpack builds. And we want to reuse as much Webpack as possible. Typing this out is not pretty. So let's go ahead and open up the terminal, and let's say npm install into dependencies Webpack merge. So this is something that will allow us to easily merge Webpack configurations. Okay, so that's done. Let's go ahead and change this up a little bit. This will actually now be a function which we can pass the environment to. And this is now a function body. So let's go ahead and create a constant, and this will be shared configuration, okay? Which again, we want it to be a function because we don't want it to be changeable. We want it to return a fresh object every single time. And you don't define a function like this, you do it equals function. Okay, and it's going to return a new object here, or rather, is this a good place? Okay, I missed the square bracket. Okay, so this is our shared configuration. Now I want to extract the things that are specific to the server. So let's go ahead and grab this node. I will put it down here. I will grab my common.js library. So this was specific to the server as well. This name is specific to the server, so let's grab that. And our entry is specific to the server because we're grabbing a specific file. So let's grab that and put it down here. The rest is pretty much shareable. So now what we want to do is we want to create a const server config, and this is going to equal to a merge between the shared config and the actual config that we want to specify for the server. So let's go ahead and create a const merge, and this is where the package is going to come in, which we have just installed. Webpack merge, like this. So let's go ahead and merge our shared config with some new config. And in this new config, all we have to do is basically put our entry file here. We want to put our target here. Let's do it like this. And what we can do is copy this output, put this output here, delete these two, and put these two back in here. And this should be enough. Now let's go ahead and copy this, paste it here. And this is now going to be the client config. And we want to change this to the client.js. So now we're going to be ingesting the client.js. Target node, we don't need it. A library target, we don't need it. And the server is going to be client.js. So bundle client. Okay, and now that this function is going to be done, we want to go ahead and return the array with server config and client config. I keep trying to call these as functions and they're not. Okay, so just remember shareable config, server config, which we are ingesting the server.js, and this is the client config. We're going to be ingesting the client.js, and the client bundle is going to be used on the client side. So let's go ahead into our Vue home index, and I will copy this script tag here. I'll remove these, and I will just go ahead and add dash client.js on the end here, and I will close this. Let's go ahead and clear our console and let's do .NET run and see what we get. Okay, so you can see the bundle client and the bundle server. It looks like we're not getting any errors, so let's go ahead and refresh this page here. Okay, so you can see the styles are applied again, and we have our blogs, and it's actually navigating us to the router, and if I'm pressing I'm done reading, it doesn't refresh the page as it did before. It is using our client-side application. So let's go ahead and refresh the main page. Where you can see the little blink, we are not getting any CSS. So let me make this full screen real quick so we can see more of the console. We're getting one error, and this error is basically saying the client-side rendering virtual DOM tree is not matching the server-side rendering content, blah, 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 blah. This basically means that it's recognizing that what we've done with the state on the server side is not matching the state on the client side. So essentially, it already knows and it's giving you an error that the client side isn't catching up with the server side. But let's go ahead and take a look at the network. So this is what we're getting back. Here's our client.js, which is loaded. So our bundle client here, which is loaded after our initial page. But our initial page still contains the mega blog and the links to the blogs. And if we go to a specific blog and we refresh, the initial blog that we get is, we're actually getting a loading blog. So even though we're going to be loading multiple blogs in the server.js bundle as a starter, so let me refresh your memory. Just closed it. Server.js bundle here. This is where we're loading all the blogs. So we're not loading a specific blog when we navigate to that route. But for now, we're at a good place where I'm going to stop this video since it's getting pretty long and I don't want it to be too long. Because in the next episode, we're going to go ahead and clean up the state catch-up on the client side and the CSS loading and the meta tags as well. But for now, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll be happy to help you. I know this can be a very confusing video, so make sure you leave a comment if you have any questions. And make sure that you have actually attempted to step through the code and actually tried to understand it before asking questions as well. But anyway, hope you enjoyed this and see you in the next episode.